Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today's Todd McFarlane Day. It is Friday. Hope you've got a great weekend planned for yourselves out there. We are looking at Spider-Man issue 13, cover dated August 1991. Not a lot of McFarlane issues left. In fact, there's only 3 left. I've already reviewed issue 16 as it was part of a crossover with X-Force. In the early on kind of issues, so between Rob Liefeld and Tom McFarlane. So basically we've got 2 more Spider-Man issues from Marvel left, issues 13 and 14, and after that, bye-bye Todd, never to go back to Marvel Comics ever again, at least up to today's date. Unless you guys have heard something that I haven't. So, well, let's start with the cover. Recreation of issue 1. These things will become kind of common, eventually, but back in the day, not a lot of artists actually did stuff like this. It would happen once in a while, but Todd really kind of started pushing it. So, re-referencing and homaging his cover from Spider-Man #1. So this is like a year later. Maybe that's why he decided to do it. I don't know. Also, he's bringing back the black costume. Maybe a good chance again to do that cover. This is the same cover, but with the new costume. Well, not the new costume, but the black costume coming back, making it different enough to submit as another cover. When he does this stuff, I wonder, I gotta assume he gets paid as if he's drawn one other cover. So maybe that's the joke of it too. Tom McFarlane may be trolling us a little bit and really getting through a cover pretty quickly and easily for a quick payday, which is smart on him and good for him as well. I certainly wouldn't fault him for it. So the return of the black costume in this issue, we'll talk about it more as we go through the story, but basically I think, maybe Todd knows he's on his way out. He came in saying, I don't want to draw the black costume, and he's been drawing the traditional costume all throughout his run. Basically the first 2 issues of Amazing Spider-Man that he did, Spider-Man was in black costume, and then in the anniversary issue 300 goes back to his traditional red and blue costume. Pretty much all through Amazing Spider-Man by Tom McFarlane, all through Spider-Man up until this issue here. So it might be his chance just to revisit the black costume one last time. And then in issue 16, going back to the traditional costume. It's just a small kind of story point for this 2-parter. So issue 13 is part 1, and we're going to open this up and have a look at it right now. So first of all, let's look at the credits. What I do want to mention, Tom McFarlane does the art, the story, and also the letters, which is interesting, right? Other than just, not doing the coloring in this issue, and he has done coloring in a past issue of Spider-Man. It almost would have been nice if he had done the coloring as well here, just to see a complete Tom McFarlane kind of drawn, colored, produced issue, right? Him doing everything art related. But it is very fun to see him do the lettering here. I think it works really well with his art. Makes sense, I think. And he tries some things that are maybe a little bit different from most at least mainstream comic letterers, and maybe is taking some things from other sources, from independent comics, underground comics and stuff, and mixing it in here. There's a cartoony kind of edge to some of the stuff in this issue that I think is maybe some of McFarlane's cartooniest art, but also very fun and works well. Another thing that works well here, this weird representation of light here, like so simple, so effective. I think that's great. It really works well for me graphically. What I want to mention too is that, what he's doing with the lettering, he's also doing with his layouts and his panel work, right? We've talked a lot about McFarlane having kind of a strong design sense. So what you're going to see here is what I like to kind of call, for lack of a better term, contextual or situational design of panels. And now the letters have that too in this issue. So, we're meeting these kind of grimy, slightly non-intelligent characters in this issue, so everything's a little bit off kilter. You notice the panels are a little bit crooked, right? Everything's kind of moving and slightly diagonal, not quite straight. And of course, even the lettering kind of somehow, represents this character and who he is graphically, right? Just the fact that it's not all just capital letters as most mainstream comics are, and we're used to that, just already makes it a little bit different, a little more kind of underground or almost like underground, independent, self-published comics, I guess is what I was looking to say there. And then we just kind of get a really close-up, cool shot of this disgusting character. And like McFarlane is pushing it in the art with the inking here. So he's definitely going, he's always been noodly and adding a lot of details, but he's definitely going for something a bit grimier and dirtier which I think we'll see more of in Spawn, but I definitely feel like he's really pushing the cartooniness, especially with this character here and his representation and the lettering as well. Like, you know, this lettering he does here, I think is super awesome. Obviously that's McFarlane, right? The way he draws his piping here that represents the word sub, just looks awesome. I mean, we're as close to we'll get to kind of a, I don't want to say underground, but almost, you know, independent McFarlane before Image, you know, producing all of the comic, or, you know, at this point, you know, split it up proportionately. 75% of the comic is produced by him, right? Just the 25 is the colorist. And we know he could have done a fairly good job on this. If we look back to the issue of Spider-Man that he colored, which is issue 3 or 4, somewhere around there. But yeah, when this contextual paneling and design, right? All the panels here are just not lined, not straight, always a little bit kind of twisted and moving, which adds to the vibe this character is giving us, right? And then whoop, we get back to, okay, it's Spider-Man, so I wouldn't say a normal couple, but a, you know, fairly normal average couple in the Marvel Universe. So everything becomes a little more rigid, a little more straightforward, right? And that's what we got here in the layout. Tom McFarlane's always been good, though, at making even these mundane pages fun and interesting with his designs, his layouts. I like the fact, once again, that the webbing comes out of the panel here. Helps give an extra layer of depth to that image. Works really well, I think, even for such a, you know, if you want to call it a pedestrian scene. Not quite sure what's going on with the backgrounds here. They don't look very McFarlane. It almost looks like maybe light boxed or something. I don't know. The detail added on, but like they just very realistic and not as cartoony. But I think it works really well. I kind of like it, to be honest. We get the requisite Spidey splash page, and I like the way he's worked in the webbing here to create some paneling and move the storytelling. Easy to follow where this should go. Colorist, man, when you're doing stuff like this, it's just little things that are annoying, but this should be blue, just like over here. It's not the red part of his costume. Just a simple silhouette here. The LE here, just enough to tell us that's the Daily Bugle, right? Makes sense. And the reading direction, definitely everything just pushes your eye in the right direction. Peter's looking over here, and then you slam into a dramatic shadowed shot of J. Jonah Jameson here. Cigar falling out of his mouth. Great shot of J. Jonah. And, you know, basically this reporter is telling J. Jonah that homeless people have been disappearing, and J. Jonah doesn't care. Not a big story, but Peter Parker obviously does, so he asks him, get a little bit of information out of him. So now he's kind of staking out the city, and this is McFarlane basically doing a quick diatribe in Spider-Man with using one page to profess his love of donuts. At least I think so. You know, I don't know if Spider-Man loving donuts was ever some sort of character trait that we've seen before. So I definitely think that's McFarlane once again using Spider-Man as kind of a cipher for himself and his love of donuts. I feel like that's what's going on here. I always thought it was odd, though. Like, you know, it's comic books. People have powers that don't exist in the real world. I get it. You know, I for some reason, I have no problem accepting Spider-Man climbing walls with his fingers and his powers. But the fact that he can use it to have donuts stick to his fingers just kind of bothered me. And still kind of does a little bit, to be honest. Just kind of weird. Just a weird choice. So again, when I talk about contextual design of panels, so we're still with Spider-Man here, still fairly rigid and you know, ordered kind of world. And then once our big monster character comes in, you know, all of that changes here, right? And kind of throws everything off balance because, you know, in this panel, he's in the dominant position, right? I would say in this panel, maybe Spider-Man is. So again, that becomes a little bit straighter like Spider-Man. So he's using, you know, thin, very straight lines graphically to represent the Spider-Man panels, right? And then using kind of a broken up dirty line to represent this character. I forget his name. I'll just keep calling him the monster guy. The bigger Violator. Kind of looks like the Violator clown, but bigger, right? A lot of this, I think, is practice for Spawn, for sure. Really like this shot of Spidey here, and I don't know what it is, but I feel like this is one of the most kind of almost most accurate anatomy that McFarlane has done on legs in a while. There's just something anatomically I think that works really well here, where sometimes he does tend to either bend or exaggerate the anatomy, right? So Spider-Man follows the guy down the sewer hole here, right? And, you know, everything's very dark. You know, it's very hard for him to see, and pops back out. Once again, the use of these kind of, you know, crooked angular panels, right? Helps with Spider-Man's disoriented feeling from being underground in the sewers, right? And also helps to represent their world, right? These characters that we don't quite see, that we see in silhouette, the big monster guy and a bunch of others. Spider-Man knows that's not a good idea, so he's out of there. And then we get a basic 2-page story of Spider-Man trying to convince Mary Jane to let him put the black Spider-Man costume back on, because he needs to not be seen when he goes underground in the sewers. I guess that's his rationale. It's kind of weak, but I mean, I get it. I feel like Spider-Man's costume, if you're in pitch black, whether it's red and blue or whether it's just fully black, you know, wouldn't make much of a difference. Maybe you would even be able to pick him out easier because of the white of the eyes of Spider-Man, right? Being more contrasted. I don't know. It's a comic book. What I will say is, you know, even though this is kind of a domestic scene where they're talking about this problem and this issue, McFarlane does a masterful job of just making it more interesting with his design and layout choices. We got the, you know, the slim 90s vertical with the sharp angle at the building, the apartment that they live in. We get, you know, the money shot of Mary Jane here with some pretty crazy hair, pretty crazy texture to her hair as well. Interesting, very McFarlane texture, if I can say that. Very McFarlane-y clothing and early 90s clothing and hair, right? I think it's been talked about a lot that McFarlane kind of had this kind of haircut here, and he kind of drew Spider-Man with that haircut. So I guess he assumed that was kind of the height of cool hair. He assumed he had the coolest hair or something. That's what it feels like. But yeah, the different, you know, here again, the big panel, Mary Jane popping out of the panel here behind these two. Just the layout and everything just makes, you know, a more mundane scene way more interesting and graphically interesting, and kind of moves us through the dialogue. There's a lot of dialogue on these 2 pages. McFarlane's getting very wordy here, so the art definitely helps move us along. If the art were any more kind of boring and not interesting, these pages would really, really suck. Even just this interesting design of these like rectangles behind here, kind of similar to what Rob Liefeld sometimes does around this period with X-Force and Youngblood. I mentioned it before. And this gradient here, which is almost like a, you know, when you go to get paints and colors to paint your house, you know, the walls or whatever, you get paint samples. That's almost what that reminds me of. Not almost, it actually does. And then we get the cool kind of 90s hero getting into his costume and getting ready for the mission shot, you know, kind of like in Commando, right? Where he puts on the vest and the guns and the grenades and stuff. But it's Spider-Man putting on the black costume. We've got the money shot of Spider-Man, the 90s shot, but we still got some insert panels for some storytelling. Really do like the added bonus here. Could have just left the page white or just a color, flat color, with that negative space, but McFarlane threw in this extra kind of bit of webbing designs, which I think are obviously so cool and work, you know, marvelously well with Spider-Man, character named Spider-Man. Just makes sense, kind of obvious. And now we're back to the world of these underground dwellers, right? So the panels start getting crooked again. And we finally meet, you know, who their leader is. And it's Morbius, the living vampire, right? Kind of his return to Marvel in the 90s after a lot of obscurity. I think in the 80s, didn't make many appearances. He's more of a 70s character, right? He's kind of that early 70s horror boom is when he was created, I think, right? So he's more of a more of a horror character, but back then, you know, the comics code was still around, so you had to be careful with horror characters and gore and monsters and stuff. So he was called Morbius the Living Vampire, which is hilarious. You know, could have just been Morbius the Vampire, but no, the comics code wouldn't allow that. But if you call him the Living Vampire, that's great. The living zombies, I guess, like, it's kind of ridiculous, and that's why, you know, no one really abides by the comic code anymore. And I was talking about the, again, contextual situational designs of panels and of the lettering McFarlane does, and the word balloons, the phylacteries. When we get to Spider-Man again, I'll point something out too that I didn't yet. So Morbius here, kind of, you know, that extra line around it, I think is interesting. Kind of has that dark magenta purple kind of color of his cape, so it identifies it as his text. You know, for some reason, just doing that implies that he's probably got some kind of creepy, slightly raspy voice because he's Morbius, right? And he's a vampire. He's a living vampire. He's got the McFarlane hands. Like, this is what the most obvious example of McFarlane hands I've ever seen. He's kind of, I guess he's having him do the Dracula, right? I've talked about this before, but I'll mention it. I always thought McFarlane hands were kind of an affectation that he had with that finger. It kind of stuck out from the rest of them. And, always thought it was more just of an artistic thing. But what I realized watching interviews with McFarlane, when he talks, he does those things with his hands do this. Sorry, that's me doing a bit of McFarlane. But he actually puts his own hands in those positions when he's explaining things and he's talking with his hands, right? So I have to think that's where that comes from. Cool McFarlane profile of Morbius. Got a pretty thick goatee there. So, again, using those word balloons, you would just see this word balloon in the dark panel. You would know in the story that that's Morbius. You would see Kiever. The monster's name is Kiever. So you would see this word balloon in a dark panel, no light, no indication of figures or anything. You would know that was Kiever, right? So that's kind of the what could be fun about using, different textures of word balloons and shapes and stuff. He does it for this character too, even though these are thought balloons. We'll see later on, I think in next issue, when he actually talks, if we kept that kind of graphic look to it. So when we get to Spider-Man again, we get a cool black costume splash page here. Another good McFarlane shot of Spider-Man. I copied this so many times as a kid, different characters, but man, did I like the musculature and stuff and the angle. Yeah, copied that a whole bunch. So just a bit of a production issue on this page. If you notice, all of the word balloons and even the narration boxes here, it seems like the lettering was like moved up. I don't know what happened there. Maybe with the acetate on top, it slid up or something, because it seems, or that they just over planned size wise or something, and the letters got smaller. I don't know exactly what happened there, but not that it ruins anything that much. You don't really know. As a kid, I never noticed it. I just noticed it now, though. Some sort of faulty production issue, but that didn't in any way diminish the reading experience. So I guess they even if they saw it, they let it pass, right? This shot too, copied that so much as a kid, learning to draw from comics, right? At first, anyways. So you got a cool shot of Morbius to finish it off, and I guess I'll have to go back real quick just to show you guys. McFarlane even makes Spider-Man's word balloon distinctive. How does he do it? It's got the regular shape, the regular lettering. It's kind of the in-between here, and the little tag to the phylactery that he's got is just not common, right? That's where he kind of makes it a little more underground or different. And also, if I'll point this out, Spider-Man's is like this, but then when we go see Peter Parker, he's just got a regular old word balloon. So am I to assume that McFarlane is kind of trying to tell us that, just like the old 60s Spider-Man cartoon, Spider-Man has two voices, one when he's Peter Parker and one when he's Spider-Man? I'm not quite sure, but that's, I guess, what I would get from that, from reading this comic, right? So if you haven't seen the old 60s show, it's really funny because, or the 60s animated cartoon of Spider-Man, because when he's Peter Parker, he's kind of, has kind of a weak kind of voice. Yes, Mr. Jameson, kind of nerdy voice. And then when he's Spider-Man, all of a sudden he's like, he speaks like your science teacher. I don't know if I'm doing it justice here, but there is quite a difference. And I guess McFarlane's trying to get that across visually here. So smart way of doing it. Once again, contextual phylacteries, word balloons, and contextual panel design as well, right? He's really going to town with his red and kind of magenta design for Morbius here. I think is cool, right? Just a simple panel, but just, double up on that line, add a bit of, pouring blood down to the bottom here, and this makes this page already way more interesting and way more fun. Good shot of Morbius too. Something about this, frizzy kind of pubic hairy texture that McFarlane does with certain hair that just I find interesting. Not a lot of people do it. It's very very much something only he does, but I think it works really well with some characters, right? I mean, there's not that much of a difference, I think, with Morbius's hair here than there is with Mary Jane's early on in the issue, right? It's a very similar texture. I think Mary Jane's just a little more coiffed than Morbius is here. Oh, One of the only depictions of Spider-Man by Jim Lee you'll ever see. Very rare. There's a cover or two he's done before where I think he guest stars in Punisher. Anyways, there you go, guys. That is my review of Spider-Man issue 13 by Todd McFarlane. If you have any thoughts, comments, or concerns about it, let me know in the comments. If you are subscribed and you're still watching, thank you so much. I appreciate your support. If you are not subscribed but you are watching the videos, please do so below. It only takes a second for you, really quick, and it helps the channel grow, helps get us out there to other like-minded people who are into comic books just like we are. Thank you guys for watching, and everybody out there, have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.
Like! Subscribe!